This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
And welcome to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X-Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X-Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern, right here live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network and our growing family of broadcast affiliates across Canada, the United States, Central America, the Caribbean, South America, the Pacific Rim, 24 Asian countries, and across Europe. If you'd like to give me a call tonight, our toll-free number is 1-877-528-8255. That is toll-free throughout the U.S., Canada, Alaska, and Hawaii. My email address, xzone@talkstarradio.com. On MSN Messenger, you can always chat with us live in our studios at, it's talkstarradio@hotmail.com. And our websites, www.xzoneradio.com and xzonetv.com. Some very important news for the Paragators TV show. We'd like to welcome Brian O'Day as one of the co-executive producers of the Paragators TV series. I had the pleasure of working with Brian in Creepy, Canada. And, by gosh, Brian and I are working again. Brian, really great seeing you today. And looking forward to working with you and John on the Paragators TV show. On tonight's show, James Oskins will be joining me in a few minutes. We're going to be talking about nuclear weapons accidents. Hour number 2, Bishop Womack joins us to talk about exorcisms. Hour number 3, J. Allen Danick talks about UFOs and aliens. And in hour number 4, the angel lady herself makes a return to the X-Zone, the one and only Sue Storm, and she'll be doing angel readings for one and all who give us a call at 1-877-528-8255. Now, that is toll-free throughout the U.S., Canada, Alaska, and Hawaii at 1-877-528-8255. My producer tonight at Master Control in Titusville, Florida, the home of the Talkstar Radio Network, is the one and only Talkstar Sam. And this is the first time I'm working with Sam after she has blessed this planet with another beautiful little girl by the name of Savannah. So, Talkstar Sam, nice having you back, and, congratulations to you and your better half and little Savannah. Today is Friday, August the 29th. And on this date in history, in 1609, Henry Hudson discovered Delaware Bay. On this date in 1907, the United Parcel Service began in Seattle. The very first radio commercials were aired on this date in 1922. On this date in 1974, Chinatown opened in theaters. And it was on this day in 1978, Don Vesco set a land record for riding a motorcycle 318 miles an hour. Oh, man, can you imagine if he took a little spill on that? If you're celebrating your birthday today, as well as on this weekend, from everyone here at the X-Zone Radio Show and Talkstar Radio Network, a very happy birthday to you and yours. And we hope that you have a lovely weekend and that you party hardy but party safe. You're celebrating your birthday today with Leanne Rimes. She turns 27. King Kong star Jack Black hits the big 40 today. Canadian country sensation Shania Twain turns 44 today. Former Dynasty star Emma Sams is 49 today. Baseball manager Lou Piniella turns 66. And David Soul, remember him from Starsky and Hutch? Well, he turns 66 today. When I come back from this 2-minute commercial break, James Oskin, James Oskin is going to be joining me, and he is a former U.S. Air Force nuclear weapons specialist. We're going to be talking to him about broken arrows and nuclear weapons accidents. On the other side of this commercial break, as the X Zone continues live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
Take a step back in time and discover old Florida cuisine at Marsh Landing Restaurant in Fellsmere. Enjoy delicacies such as frog legs, gator tail, catfish, and swamp cabbage, or enjoy the more traditional cuisine like hand-cut Angus steaks, ribs, and seafood. Join us for breakfast with a southern flair featuring sweet potato pancakes, biscuits and gravy, and much more. Planning a party? Marsh Landing's private dining room can accommodate groups from 8 to 80 people. While you're visiting, enjoy the historic pictures, artifacts, and stories that line the walls. Marsh Landing is truly a unique experience. Marsh Landing Restaurant, 44 North Broadway in historic Fellsmere, or visit marshlandingrestaurant.com. Marsh Landing, Old Florida cuisine at its best.
Are you interested in the paranormal, ghosts, UFOs, or psychic phenomenon? Join me, Tim Bartley, co-host of Talking to Spirits with Lightworkers Tim and Justina, coming mid-January 2017 to the XZBN. We will channel spirits live and talk to them, revealing all kinds of amazing information. Spiritual attachments will be found and removed on the show, and so much more. To find out when you can listen to Talking to Spirits with Lightworkers Tim and Justina, visit www.xzbn.net for listeners on both sides of the veil.
Welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. We're going to be talking about broken arrows, and we're also going to be talking about nuclear weapon accidents this hour. Our two special guests are James Oskins and Michael Maggelet. Now, we had Michael and James on a little while ago, but we were having problems with our phone system, so we thought it was only fair that we brought them back on and let you hear the important message that they have. Now, James C. Oskins is a U.S. Air Force retiree and was a nuclear specialist, atomic weapons fusing and firing specialist, and a nuclear weapons chief from 1955 to 1975. He had assignments at Briggs Air Force Base, Texas, RAF Upper Hayden in the United Kingdom, Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada, and McConnell Air Force Base in Kansas. Now, Michael Maggelet is a U.S. Air Force retiree as well and was a nuclear weapons team member and team chief from 1980 to 1995. He had assignments at Peace Air Force Base, New Hampshire, Plattsburgh Air Force Base in New York, in Rhineland-Pfalz in Germany, and Ellsworth Air Force Base, South Dakota. Joining me tonight are these two gentlemen. They're authors of a very interesting book entitled Broken Arrow, the declassified story of U.S. nuclear weapons accidents. And gentlemen, welcome back to the X Zone. Glad that you can make it tonight.
Yes, thanks for having us, Rob.
All right, that was Michael, right?
No, this is Mike. I'm here on the phone too.
Okay, great. First of all, when you look at the weapon systems that we have today, how do they compare to the weapon systems that both of you worked on going back, from in the 70s?
In the 70s?
Do you want to answer that one first, Jim, or do you?
No, I'll take it.
Okay.
Actually, Rob, I retired in 75, and the the development between 1955, when I first got into the field, and 1975, it was like night and day. I got in just as the weapons were being developed into what's commonly referred to as a wooden bomb. In other words, a bomb that didn't require a lot of intensive labor. The early weapons were extremely complex, very difficult laboratory devices that required hours, days to assemble. And when I came in, they were just getting away from that concept. When I retired, there wasn't a lot left to actually disassemble and assemble on a weapon.
Now, when it comes to the silos that we've all seen on TV and the teams that stay in the silos, is that the same way it was in the earlier days as it is today?
Yes, actually, there was a lot more manpower involved in the early days because each silo tended to have its own launch crew. Now you have one launch crew for 10 missiles, 10 different silos. So the manpower reduction has been sizable.
All right, James, how many U.S. nuclear weapons accidents have actually occurred?
According to the Department of Defense, they released a list of 32. That does not include 4 that happened over Johnson Island during some testing. For some reason, they didn't include those in the list, and I'm not sure why. But there are some that we feel are broken arrows that were not included in the list for some strange reason or the other.
Well, what constitutes a broken arrow?
You want to take it, Mike?
Sure, I can answer that question. Broken arrow is an incident involving a nuclear weapon that could result in the loss of a nuclear weapon through jettisoning, a burning of a nuclear weapon, loss of nuclear weapon components, theft of a nuclear weapon. Any of those incidents of a severe nature that causes severe damage to a nuclear weapon. The Department of Defense also has what's called a bent spear category, which is serious damage to a nuclear weapon that doesn't involve, major damage or destruction of the weapon that require cleanup by the Department of Defense.
I've got a question for you, Michael, from one of our listeners. They would like to know if at the end of every flight, when the bomber would come back to its Air Force base, was the bomb taken off that specific aircraft?
What happens to the weapon after it's downloaded?
Yes.
They're returned to the maintenance facility. We have several steps we have to take. First thing the air crew would do, of course, they turn the weapon over to the what we used to call loaders, 462XO personnel. They would perform a safety check on the weapon, verify the serial numbers, then we'd transport it back to the weapon storage area. When it got into the igloo or maintenance bay, we'd perform safety checks on it again, and then they were, depending on the era, back in the old days, of course, they would disassemble the weapon. Maybe if there was a capsule in the IFI gear, they might have took that out. Then they had to remove what was called a capsule, or a cartridge, which contained the arming and fusing mechanisms. That would have to be extensively tested. Then, of course, the maintenance technicians themselves would have to look over the weapon and perform any preventive maintenance, say, repair the paint, inspect the markings. And, of course, we'd have to, repaint the weapon, sand it, paint it, etc. And there's other things we had to do. But in general, there wasn't really much in the later time frame, and say in the 80s and 90s, that we'd have to do as far as maintenance-wise. But in the early days, the maintenance was pretty extensive.
Unreal. James, is there a missing nuclear weapon at, is it Thule, Greenland?
Yeah, there's a conspiracy theory that says there is, but there's not. The DOD in their search after the crash of the B-52, they located the key components of all 4 weapons. For instance, the the tea bottles, as they're referred to sometimes as reservoirs, they were all four located on the surface of the ice, making it impossible to have a nuclear detonation. All four parachutes were located. So no, there is not a missing bomb there. There may be a few stray pieces of metal laying on the seabed, but other than that, there's no missing bomb.
Now, Michael, are there any missing nuclear weapons?
Well, in the U.S. arsenal, there's certainly a few, and then definitely there's a lot in the Soviet arsenal. There's a lot of Soviet submarines that have sunk, and I just tabulated a list, and some of them off the U.S. East Coast, some of them out in the Pacific, probably about 45 warheads from the Soviets. As far as the United States goes, we've lost a weapon off of the Oregon, Washington coast in the Pacific. Now, the DoD originally wrote that was lost in Puget Sound, but for some reason, I don't know why there was some disinformation there, or who knows. But it was actually off the Washington Pacific coast, about 100 miles offshore. Another incident involved the so-called Tybee bomb, which is a Mark 15 Mod 0 thermonuclear bomb. It was a B-47 aircraft was involved with a collision with a fighter, and the crew jettisoned the weapon. And we know for a fact that it didn't contain a nuclear capsule, so it's not nuclearly armed in that sense. Other weapons, of course, have been lost. A C-124 aircraft was transporting some weapons to an overseas base and encountered an in-flight emergency. And it had to jettison 2 bombs, and did that right off of New Jersey. So there's 2 Mark V bombs that are sitting in the Atlantic. Another incident, of course, involved the so-called Goldsboro bombs. Portions of those weapons were recovered. One was recovered intact. Another weapon fell free fall and hit the earth. They recovered most of the components of that weapon, what we call the primary, tritium bottles, some of the explosives. Of course, everything was shattered and destroyed. Right. But the secondary component, the thermonuclear component, just continued, since it was so heavy, is made of uranium, just continued into the earth. And they, due to flooding and the excavation, they never recovered that weapon component.
If someone was to find these weapons, let's say a hostile enemy to the United States, would they be able to detonate the broken arrows that are missing?
No, definitely not.
Really?
Yes, the most of them have been there going on 50 years. The explosives would be nothing but sludge at this point, the conventional explosives. They did not have the nuclear component necessary to make it go as a nuclear detonation. There's just no way that they'd work at this point.
If I could add
something. Go ahead.
I think the main concern the government has is, of course, you have maybe some information on the design of the weapons, the technology. I mean, it might be, from our viewpoint nowadays, archaic technology, but whatnot. But you got to remember, it's a nuclear weapon, and I mean, they could recover it and say X-ray it and get some ideas and stuff. But like as Jim said, over the span of 50 or more years, you're going to have a lot of problems with the seawater seeping into components and basically corroding everything.
All right, guys, please stand by. We have to take our break at the bottom of the hour. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone on the Talkstar Radio Network. Our two guests this hour, James Oskins and Michael Maggelet, we're talking about their book, Broken Arrow, The Declassified History of U.S. Nuclear Weapons Accidents. And their website is www.geocities.com/USAF463/index.html. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as the X Zone continues live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. We'll be back.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. We're talking to two gentlemen who've written a book entitled Broken Arrow, the Declassified History of the U.S. Nuclear Weapon Accidents. And we're talking to Michael Maggelet and James Oskins. And gentlemen, thanks very much for rejoining us tonight. It's great having you with us. And here's a question for you, Jim. Was the USS Scorpion sunk by the Soviets?
No. There's no evidence that it was. There have been literally thousands of pictures of the sunken hull taken. Mm-hmm. And there's no evidence of an explosion, a tear in the outer hull. The Scorpion was a victim of a mechanical failure that allowed it to sink below its crush depth. And from the pictures, you can tell that it was crushed rather than flooded. If a torpedo had hit it, mm-hmm. the hull would not have collapsed because
it would have been full of water.
It would have been full of water,
right.
Yes.
Gotcha.
It would have been no difference in pressure.
Michael, how many accidents have the Soviets had?
Oh, we know from open sources and incidents or accidents they've reported to the International Atomic Energy Agency. It looks like about 5 accidents that they've acknowledged, and all of these are concern their submarine force. The earliest, probably the most interesting one, I guess, would be the one in 1968, which involved a Gulf II submarine. It sunk about 600 or 700 miles north of Oahu. And, of course, if anybody grew up in the mid-'70s will probably remember the CIA, Howard Hughes, and the Glomar Explorer. And we found evidence that, in fact, that portions of that submarine may have been recovered, and we have a lot of interesting information that we're going to publish in our next book.
And what's your next book all about?
It's it'll concern more information we discovered on nuclear weapons accidents and hundreds, or perhaps more serious incidents, say lightning strikes on weapons. We've uncovered tons more additional information through the Freedom of Information Act. And I think it'll be some eye-opening material. Well,
I'm going to look forward to hearing that. It sounds like you've just taken the next step. Let's see. So, how did you guys obtain all this information? Was it through the Freedom of Information Act or through sources? How did you do it?
Most of it was through the Freedom of Information Act, Rob. It's a very time-consuming process, but that's the way we got most of it. There are some available on the web. Mm-hmm. Some of it's personal knowledge. Some of it is through contacts that we know. But generally speaking, the majority is from the Freedom of Information Act.
What are the steps in acquiring information through the Freedom of Information Act?
The key is trying to determine which agency has the information, which is really the most difficult part of the process. Once you can figure that out, you simply send them a letter requesting the information. Mm-hmm. If it's classified, of course, it has to go through the declassification process, which can literally take months, if not years. and in some instances you get a blank piece of paper back because everything on it is still classified.
Michael, are there any incidents relating to UFOs? We've all heard the stories. We've watched Larry King when he's had a panel on talking about the missiles that were neutralized by UFOs. What's the real truth behind these stories?
Well, from some of the information we received through the FOIA, I've tried to correlate some of those incidents that have been discussed on the television, and we couldn't really generally find any dates that matched. Mm-hmm. That's not to state that they didn't occur. If an Air Force officer maybe says, yeah, that occurred on that date, then, I'd trust what he said. Now, we do have some incidents that have been declassified or that were never classified from NORAD. We know about intrusions near Air Force bases. There's incidents in 1977. For some reason, 77 was a big year for some incidents around Air Force bases. Near Loring Air Force Base, there were some intrusions by what they called unidentified aircraft, and they suspect that was maybe a helicopter. Now, of a more serious nature, out near Malmstrom Air Force Base in November 1977, there were a number of serious incidents because these unidentified objects, as they call them, would appear near several missile sites in the Gila and Lima fields out in the middle of Montana. I used to be stationed out there, so I'm kind of familiar with the area they discuss. I didn't personally know anybody involved in those incidents, but reading through the reports, it's rather chilling. They discuss scrambling F-106 aircraft to intercept these objects. They varied in the distance according to the security guards at the missile sites, the silos. They say when the F-106 aircraft would appear, the objects would turn their lights out and disappear. The F-106s would depart, and the objects would turn the lights back on. These numbered anywhere from maybe one or two objects to maybe half a dozen. They'd range in, some of them would be over the missile sites. Some of them would be off maybe a couple hundred yards away, a couple thousand feet away, and they're just described as bright objects emitting various colored lights. And there's one statement from one security policeman, or air policeman at the time. He says he watched the object as an F-106 approached. The object went from, say, tree height and disappeared straight up. He says he could not discern the object from the stars in the sky, so that's quite interesting.
Geez, how do they? Is it NORAD that's responsible for the airspace over the missile bases?
Generally, I'd say so. Most of the bases have their own air traffic controllers who are responsible for the area. But as far as the missiles, I mean, the aircraft could fly over them at a certain altitude, or they might have restrictions around them. But generally, the missiles are pretty well protected by blast shields and blast doors. There are some sensitive areas, of course. The pilots know not to fly near. Military air bases, for one. You fly near a military air base nowadays, you're definitely going to get intercepted by an F-16 or other military aircraft. So
nobody's taking any chances.
True.
James, can you discuss some of the newly discovered accidents?
Yes, we've stumbled across a few that we feel are broken arrows. One occurred in March of '64 in Alaska, which involved a flood of the storage facility that had nuclear weapons in it. And basically it was a result of the Great Alaskan Quake of '64. And the flood was actually a 22-foot high tsunami. It just engulfed a Navy weapons storage area, flooded the igloos and the weapons. There was no likelihood of them detonating, but it fits the description of a broken arrow. The fact that they were damaged, they had to be returned to depot to ensure they were still functional. And another accident involved a rocket motor fire, which spread to a building containing an atomic demolition munitions. The weapon was damaged by the fire, but it didn't contain any nuclear components, fortunately. They were stored in a training nuclear components were stored in a bird cage, and it was damaged by the fire. We're not exactly sure where that happened at this time. We suspect it was overseas someplace.
When you and the other members of the teams were doing maintenance on these atomic weapons, was there any possibility that they could have gone off?
Well, high explosive-wise, yes. Nuclearly, very, very, very remote.
What did it feel like, Michael, working with these weapons of mass destruction?
Personally, I didn't have any problems with it. I kind of had an interest in nuclear weapons from about the time I was in high school. Mm-hmm. And once I got to tech school, of course, we learned a lot more about them. Of course, we disassembled every weapon that was in the Air Force at the time, just about Air-28 Genie, the W-28, the B-43, the B-57, all types of bombs, warheads, missile warheads. So you kind of really got used to working on the trainers, mm-hmm. which were basically almost exact replicas of the real bomb, minus the nuclear material and high explosive components. Personally, I never had any problem working with them. No. It was a challenge because our career field was very challenging at the time, and I think it continues to this day.
Now, speaking about your career within the United States Air Force, were you selected for the work that you did with nuclear weapons, or did you volunteer for that area?
I was selected based on a bank of tests that they administered right after we enlisted. My scores were high enough that I qualified for the, as they called it then, the atomic energy field. I had absolutely no idea what I was getting into until I got to school. But as far as we had a healthy respect for the weapons. We treated them better than we did our cars, and in some cases our wives, because they were an extremely valuable asset.
And a very powerful asset.
Yes, occasionally I would think, there's an entire city right there that we could destroy.
Wow.
But I had no problem working on them.
Tell me, were either one of you two gentlemen involved in a nuclear weapons accident?
I was kind of offhandedly involved. There was an accident over Kirtland Air Force Base where a B-36 jettisoned a Mark 17 bomb, which happened to weigh 42,000 pounds.
My Lord.
Yes, it was the first operational thermonuclear weapon. It was a monstrous thing. It accidentally was jettisoned through the bomb bay doors, and I had worked on that bomb and prepared it for shipment. It was dropped from about 1,500 feet, detonated on impact. The high explosive detonated. Nuclear detonation wasn't possible because there was no nuclear capsule in the bomb.
Thank the good Lord for that.
Yeah. If memory serves me, the only fatality was a cow, which was killed by shrapnel.
Now, Michael, what agencies are responsible for cleaning up a nuclear weapons accident?
Well, after an accident, of course, once an accident occurs, mm-hmm. the Joint Nuclear Accident Coordinating Center at Kirtland Air Force Base would likely receive a message that something has occurred. Our last one, of course, was most publicly was in 1968 off of Spain. Usually the first people on the scene will be security forces to cordon off the area. The responsibility for cleaning up weapons debris, identifying the weapons, mm-hmm. the components, and so forth, and what we call render safe the weapon is explosive ordnance disposal. They're a different career field from ours. Of course, their job is much, much, much more hazardous in regards to that because they have to deal with high explosive components, radioactive components, some of the toxic substances inside the weapon, so they have to wear what's called anti-sea suits and gas masks and whatnot. And the Department of Energy now has what's called the Accident Response Group. Those are some of the scientists, some of the weapons designers, individuals who've had experience in accidents in the past, health individuals. They oversee the accident situation. They coordinate everything. So it's real precise activity after a weapons accident to clean up the debris, identify all the components, package up any soil, ship it off back to the United States in some cases. So it's a real involved process.
And I would imagine that the powers to be move very fast when there's a broken arrow incident?
Yes, you have to understand, of course, you have a lost nuclear weapon, and basically they want to prevent a public panic or something in that regard. And, personally, I don't... Yeah, in some cases there would be a likelihood of a panic because you have radioactive components, say plutonium or something, and say if there's an accident situation where there's dispersal of plutonium by high explosive explosion or something like that, yeah, it would cause concern in a populated area.
Gentlemen, we have to take a commercial break. Please stand by. Great having you with us. This is just fascinating. James Oskins and Michael Maggelet are our special guests. They are the authors of Broken Arrow, the Declassified History of U.S. Nuclear Weapons Accidents. And Exonation, their website is www.geocities.com/USAF463/index.html. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone on the Talkstar Radio Network, and we're coming to you live and around the world from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. In the next hour, I'll be speaking to Bishop Womack about exorcism. Whatever you do, don't go away. More to come in tonight's X Zone right here on Talkstar.
19 Sergeant Central. 19 Sergeant, check. Officers on the scene.
Hi, I'm Larry Lawson, host of Paranormal Stakeout. With over 36 years in law enforcement, I have learned a few things. The most important is the proper gathering and preservation of evidence is vital to putting the bad guy behind bars. It's no different in the world of paranormal investigation. Whether it's the search for the afterlife, cryptozoology, UFOs, and extraterrestrials, how we gather the evidence, preserve that evidence, and present it to a jury of our peers will make the ultimate difference in proving the existence of worlds and entities that are beyond our imagination. Join me, Larry Lawson, every week on Paranormal Stakeout when, along with my guests, we'll take a journey to prove with indisputable evidence what man has struggled to believe for centuries. Go to xzbn.net for the broadcast schedule and check me out at paranormalstakeout.com.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
James C. Oskins and Michael H. Maggelet, they are the authors of Broken Arrow, the Declassified History of U.S. Nuclear Weapons Accidents, and their website is www.geocities.com/USAF463/index.html. Once again, the name of their book is Broken Arrow, the Declassified History of U.S. Nuclear Weapons Accidents, and their website is www.geocities.com/USAF463/index.html. Were there any sabotage incidents surrounding any of the nuclear weapon accidents?
Yes, Rob, there was some minor ones, but one of the better-known ones occurred actually at a base in England when a Air Force Master Sergeant named Cunningham locked himself in an igloo at RAF Sculthorpe in 1958 and threatened to shoot a weapon with a .45 caliber pistol. The weapon didn't have its nuclear capsule in it or even in the building, so there was no danger of a nuclear explosion. He could have possibly detonated the high explosive in the weapon, killing himself and destroying the igloo, but he was talked out of it. And as a result of the incident, a lot of improvements were made in security, human reliability program, the two-man concept, passive action link equipment.
Now, if he would have detonated the high explosives in that bomb, were there any other bombs in the igloo at the time? And if there were, would they have also been detonated, and could the massive detonation triggered a nuclear explosion?
No. There were other weapons in there. Best of my knowledge, I think there were 2 others.
Mm-hmm.
But no, there was no possibility of a nuclear explosion. None.
So once these weapons are on the ground and back in the igloos, is it safe to say that they're rather docile at this point?
Oh, yes. Yes, quite so.
So everybody's done the best they can do to prevent a nuclear detonation while these weapons are on the ground?
Yes. And while they're being transported, either by aircraft or ground transportation.
Gentlemen, we have to say so long for tonight, but I'd like to thank both of you for a couple of things. Number one, for coming on the show tonight again and for sharing your experience and your stories with us. But I'd also like to thank you and the other members of the armed forces for doing your job in making democracy what it is today. So to both you gentlemen and to your colleagues, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, and when your new book comes out, please, let's get back on again and share some more stories. Gentlemen, have a wonderful weekend, and once again, thanks again.
Thank you, Rob.
Bye-bye now. Just imagine that, eh? Men and women around the world doing what these gentlemen were doing in order to keep democracy and freedom for each and every one of us. We owe these people a great load of thanks. So that's why when Remembrance Day comes around, it's nice to support our troops and our veterans. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with Bishop Womack as we talk about exorcism, live and around the world, on the Talkstar Radio Network from our studios in beautiful Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. We'll be back.